Now, Communications Minister Solly Malatsi has a tough task ahead because he'll be appearing before the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies tomorrow. And that's to defend that bold new move. That's a proposed policy directive that could pave the way for Elon Musk's Starlink to operate in South Africa. It's a decision that could dramatically change the country's digital landscape, but it's not without controversy. For more on what's at stake and where the sticking points might be, we're joined now by Ntokozo Khumalo. Ntokozo, where exactly are these sticking points? Let's get into that, because one would have thought, well, what's bound to happen here is you have Starlink, which is going to get into more rural areas, especially the areas that our local ICT companies can't necessarily get into, and that may actually be helpful. But the sticking point seems to be just this 30% BE transaction.
It's certainly around the regulation, Aravile, that why is Starlink getting that treatment of being able to bypass that 30% requirement. But it's more than just that. When we look at that equity equivalent, there's other things around it as well, like multinationals being required. For example, the Starlink would be required to have some of these installations, particularly in libraries and in schools and in hospitals, to do that for free. Other companies have had to meet those requirements. So the argument being a little bit around why would Starlink be the one that gets that special treatment? And we did earlier speak to the Association of Comms and Technology, and this is what they had to say around what the concerns are and what issues might potentially arise when it comes to their other members watching what is playing out right now. Let's take a listen.
In terms of what we've seen on Friday, the issue that we have with it upon reading it is the issue of too much focus on new entrants. So whilst we welcome the approach that says there is an alternative that can be looked at in terms of the 30% historically disadvantaged groups in terms of the Electronic Communications Act, then we're saying why only give the new entrants preferential treatment? Why don't you open it up to even incumbents that are already in the market? And also, when you're looking at that, you also do not want, we said when we're looking at it, we do not want to have different rules for people that will be competing essentially in the same market.
Ntokozo, I spoke to the Black Business Council. I've spoken to a few tech companies themselves as well who have been wondering about this. And the sentiment clearly is, well, we've had to do so much work here to do this, to get all this right in accordance with the law. And yet here comes somebody who might just get it. What's the sentiment that this could send to businesses wanting to get into South Africa?
Well, as we just heard there, that it is about, having that equal playing field for all players looking to come into the market. So when it comes to concerns around market sentiment, how seriously can potential investors take South Africa's regulation, particularly when it comes to transformation, because there's a lot of steps that they need to follow to be able to operate in this market. So that would also, possibly impact investment decisions for those who might still be looking to come into the country going forward. But exactly those who have already done all this legwork, Aravile, have invested heavily. We saw the likes of Microsoft, Google, having to meet those equity equivalent requirements, investing billions into the market, and also the other steps when it comes to, enterprise development, ensuring that they have real impact on the ground in the communities that they work in. Those are issues that competitors will have gripe with.
And I think that there needs to be some clarity here, because it's not as though Starlink would all of a sudden be giving 30% to previously disadvantaged groups in South Africa, right? That 30% would still need to be bought by previously. So it's a purchase of shareholding in that corporation, right? So it's not as if...
And with other industry players, it's not Aravile who'll come in and get the 30% or Ntokozo.
I'm not getting a whole 30%, right? I'm only getting a portion of it. And if South Africa is that lucrative a market, as the same as all the other markets that Starlink is now in, if South Africa is that lucrative a market, why would getting only 70% of your business hurt? You still have the majority stakeholding. You still make up all the rules. You still make all the decisions ultimately. And so the big question mark we need to then, I suppose, ask ourselves as South Africa is, are we going to let go of ourselves in this one situation because we think, well, it's important to have investment, in the words of Kosatu? Or are we going to then say, actually, if we keep changing like this, then we don't actually have real integrity when it comes to the laws we've actually put forward. Are businesses looking at this and perhaps being a little bit concerned about where we stand as an investment destination?
Absolutely, Arabile. I've also had some conversations, a lot of them choosing to be off the record with industry players. And it goes back to that policy uncertainty, because their argument is saying if government has crafted this legislation policy around transformation that other industry players has had to follow, what makes Starlink so special? And interestingly enough, big players such as your MTN, Vodacom, Cell C, that might have issues with Starlink coming into the South African market, have actually worked with Starlink, particularly MTN Group, across the continent when it comes to doing these satellite trials. So it does beg the question, if the likes of MTN and so on could work with Starlink across the continent, going far back as December 2023, when Starlink actually entered the African market in 2023, what is the challenge then with the two working together potentially in South Africa?
That's actually very interesting, because the chairman of MTN is Mcebisi Jonas. Mcebisi Jonas is also the special envoy to the United States for South Africa. If he has worked with Starlink before, one would think that that kind of conversation would have happened, or at least could have happened at the very least. But this is the same person who, of course, we didn't see in that interaction just about a week ago in the Oval Office.
Well, Ramaphosa did clarify he was part of the strategy.
Of course, right? And his work is mainly in the background as well. So we don't know exactly how things will fare there. But I think it's just so fascinating. And I think this is a discussion that is important, because you've got companies that are trying to come up in South Africa's ICT sector and perhaps aren't getting enough attention or love or funding, etc. And here we are, possibly putting out the red carpet for Starlink. And perhaps it goes to the integrity, as I said again, of the country. Ntokozo, appreciate it. It's always going to be a fascinating discussion, this one, but appreciate your reporting on this story then as well. Ntokozo Khumalo there, continuing to unpack the Starlink issue then, of course. There's so much still at play on this, so please do continue to be with us then, as we'll try to get you more details on it. Of course, as we said, the Minister of Communications tomorrow appearing before the Scopa Committee.